I never thought walking into my own home could feel like stepping into a war zone. But that day, as I stood between my parents, a ring pressed onto my finger that I had never chosen, I felt a numbness I couldn't shake. My eyes, hollow and unseeing, betrayed nothing. Behind me, scrawled on the hallway wall, someone had left a message. She came home. She's happy now, you could be too. My heart twisted. They had brought her back. They would bring me back too, whether I wanted it or not. I whispered the truth to Patricia, my lawyer and my lifeline. They're going to make her marry him anyway. Patricia cursed under her breath. The tension in her voice was sharp, dangerous. This complicates everything. If Anna recants her statement, her voice trailed, but I understood. Without Anna's testimony, the case could crumble. I said she won't. Look at her eyes, I insisted, my voice shaking despite the steel I tried to hide behind. She's terrified. Fear doesn't matter if she won't testify. Sunday brought new threats. My father's influence, once subtle and manipulative, became brazen. Theodora's neighbor called in panic, men photographing our house from across the street. By the time the police arrived, they were gone. Their message was clear: we know where you are. Margaret, ever cautious, suggested moving me, but Theodora, my guardian in more ways than one, shook her head. Running tells them they're winning. We stay, we document, we fight. Monday was court day. The permanent protective order hearing loomed, and nothing could have prepared me for the sea of eyes that greeted me as I walked in. My extended family filled the courtroom, dressed in their finest, their faces a mix of pity and disgust. My parents sat in the front row, my mother dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. I tried to steady myself beside Patricia, willing my trembling hands to remain still. My father's lawyer began, painting a picture of a loving family torn apart by Western corruption. Witnesses paraded across the room, the imam from our mosque, family friends, even my old pediatrician who testified I had never shown signs of abuse. Each word hit me like a physical blow. My mother had always answered for me. Now I had no protector except Patricia. When our turn came, Patricia presented the evidence meticulously: photos of my injuries, essays documenting years of preparation for forced marriage, footage of my father arriving with fake prescriptions. Then she called Miss Rodriguez, my teacher, to testify. I watched her hands tremble slightly as she described noticing my weight loss, the pamphlets I read in secret, the essays that worried her. Did you report these concerns? My father's lawyer asked sharply. I tried to build trust first, she replied. I wanted her to feel safe. Patricia objected, after allegedly influencing her with anticultural propaganda, but the courtroom had already begun twisting Miss Rodriguez into the villain, the manipulator who had planted dangerous ideas. When my turn to testify came, Patricia coached me to focus only on facts: the burn scars, the beatings, the stories my cousins had been promised to Hamad Habibai's dead wives. The judge's voice was measured, yet skeptical. These are serious allegations. Do you have proof? Death certificates are public record, Patricia replied. Both women died of kidney failure before age 23, multiple pregnancies, and now they want to give him another child. Objections flew, lawyers shouted, the courtroom a storm of words and tension. Then the doors opened. A young woman entered, walking with a limp, wearing a hijab, Fatima Habibai, my father's first wife, alive. Her voice trembled as she spoke. She told of being married at 15, forced into multiple pregnancies, beaten, her family covering her death. She had escaped 5 years ago, living in hiding, building a life in secrecy. Her testimony shattered everything. Medical records, proof of injuries, photographs of the fake grave, every piece a dagger to my father's defense. The judge ruled, permanent protective order granted. My parents could no longer contact me, any violation criminally punishable. As we left, the world felt surreal. Fatima's hand on my arm, whispering, "You're not alone, there are more of us than they want to admit." Outside, the city carried on oblivious, but inside, the victory was monumental. We had faced terror, threats, and deceit, and we had survived. But victory came with its own war. In the days that followed, harassment escalated. Social media accounts hacked, defamatory posts, civil lawsuits meant to drain resources. And the most painful, other girls, the ones I had tried to help, now being twisted into weapons against me. Footprints in the garden, broken glass, shadowy figures. Our sanctuary was breached. Margaret suggested witness protection, but I remembered Fatima hiding for 5 years. Running meant abandoning those still trapped. We fortified, planned, and documented. Then Anna reached out. A warning. A small piece of paper pressed into my hand with names, addresses, girls who needed help. My heart raced. Plans were made. Security tightened. Routine varied. But the predators evolved. They adapted. Wednesday, a break-in. Men, strangers, and distant relatives searched for me. The bathroom lock held, sirens wailed, and the nightmare ended with the intruders fleeing, but the message was clear: we were still targets. I refused to run. Instead, I began distributing knowledge, creating pamphlets, notebooks, hidden guides. Legal rights, escape plans, emergency numbers, all disguised in homework and school materials. Patricia called, updating me on escaped relatives and court filings. The network grew. One girl, finding a notebook, passed it to 5 others. Their courage spread like wildfire. Each girl saved was a small rebellion against control. But threats continued, lawsuits, false accusations, and intimidation aimed to silence us. And yet, each day, each small victory strengthened our resolve. Fatima's letters reminded me that survival could lead to life beyond fear. Samira, a brave girl, escaped from under her family's control using tactics we had devised. The pattern spread. Teachers, counselors, volunteers joined the cause. By the end of the week, the viral article and the Freedom Network's first meeting brought a new wave of hope. Girls across states were finding the notebooks, learning their rights, escaping the shadow of fear. Each story became a proof that survival was not just possible, it was contagious. Even as my name was formally erased by my family, I felt a strange sense of liberation. Had played their final card, and I was still standing. The war wasn't over. It might never truly end. But every girl who found freedom, every voice we protected, was a victory no one could erase. And as I whispered instructions to yet another terrified girl, pen in hand, guiding her to safety, I realized we had already won the battle that mattered most. The war for our freedom had begun, and no force could stop it now. The days that followed felt like living inside a storm with no shelter. Every knock on the door, every unexpected ring of the phone, carried the possibility of disaster. Margaret had arranged for our new safe house, a small apartment above a retired police officer's garage, tucked into a quiet neighborhood 40 miles from Theodora's house. It was fortified, motion sensors, cameras, panic buttons in every room. But even with all that, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on us, always watching, always waiting. That first night, I stared at the address Anna had given me, a house in our community where other girls might be trapped, unaware of the life waiting outside their doors. My chest ached for them. I thought of the faces I'd already seen, the terror in their eyes mirrored in mine years ago. If we could reach them, teach them, give them the tools I hadn't had, perhaps we could end this cycle. The next morning, Miss Rodriguez arrived with boxes of supplies. We worked in silence at first, the sound of pens scratching against paper punctuating the tension. We turned pamphlets into hidden guides, legal rights disguised as homework, emergency numbers disguised as math problems, step-by-step escape plans hidden in history notebooks. Every detail mattered. Every precaution could save a life. Patricia called mid-morning, her voice brisk, reporting on the aftermath of Theodora's break-in. Fingerprints had identified some of the men as distant cousins on my father's side. Warrants were issued, but they were already gone, slipping away before the law could touch them. Family has also filed an appeal on the protective order, Patricia added. They're claiming religious discrimination. I swallowed hard. No matter the legal battles, their goal was the same: wear us down, force us into submission. By Thursday, the information packets were ready. We had prepared 50, knowing many would be intercepted, destroyed, or ignored. But even if one reached a girl who needed it, that one could change a life. And that night began. A social worker appeared with a teenage girl from another family, eyes wide with fear. She whispered that she had found one of our notebooks hidden in her cousin's room. She was promised to a man more than 3 times her age, and her cycle had just begun, a ticking clock on her life. Margaret arranged an emergency placement for her, and I sat with her, explaining what would happen next. At first, the fear was paralyzing. Her hands shook, her eyes darted, desperate for any sign of escape. But slowly, as I explained her options, the fear began to transform into determination. One by one, the invisible chains loosened. Then came a call from an unknown number. A voice barely more than a whisper spoke urgently. "We're 6 girls. Ages 12 to 16. We found your information. We need help." My heart raced. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I grabbed a pen, and as she spoke, I wrote down every detail: the girls' names, locations, routines, the threats they faced. I walked her through the exact steps she needed to take: how to approach school counselors, teachers, and social workers without alerting her parents. "What if they catch us?" she asked, voice trembling. "Then you try again," I said, firm and unwavering. "And again until you're free." Friday morning brought urgent news. Patricia's voice was sharp with warning. "Your father's lawyer filed an emergency motion. They're claiming you're recruiting minors into dangerous situations. They want criminal charges for corruption of minors, interference with parental rights." It's meant to scare you into silence. But fear had lost its grip on me. I was done being silent. That afternoon, I met with a journalist, someone who specialized in human rights cases. She promised anonymity, no real names, no photographs, just the truth of what was happening. She wanted to expose the network of girls helping each other, the underground movement we had created. The story wouldn't run for weeks, but knowing it would exist felt like victory already. Saturday brought a package with no return address. Inside were photos of Fatima smiling at her nursing school graduation, letters in shaky handwriting. She had survived, built a life, fallen in love, and carved out happiness. Holding those photos, I cried, not tears of fear, but tears of hope. Survival could be more than survival. Sunday, a quiet day, was a brief reprieve before the next wave. Margaret called, 3 more girls had come forward, all citing the information packets. CPS was opening investigations. The ripple effect was real. Every girl we reached was a victory, proof that knowledge could be more powerful than fear. Monday, my father's lawyer held a press conference, painting me as a villain corrupting children with Western ideas. She targets vulnerable young girls, fills their heads with lies about loving families, he declared. But Patricia had prepared counter statements from teachers, counselors, and social workers who had noticed patterns for years, but had lacked the tools to intervene. Then came the blow. A video appeared online. Girls from my community, coached and pressured, recited rehearsed lines portraying me as a predator. Their voices trembled, but the manipulation was clear to anyone paying attention. The retired officer I was staying with advised me to stop watching. They were trying to break me. Wednesday accelerated everything. One of the girls who had contacted me last week, Samira, 16 and the bravest, was being moved out of state by her family. Time was critical. I insisted on going near the courthouse where her family was taking her. From a safe distance, we watched, ready to intervene if possible. As the van approached, I saw Samira, pressed between relatives, trying to remain compliant. Our eyes met. I mouthed a single word, run. She didn't at first, too scared, too trapped. But as they passed the checkpoint, she fell to the ground, screaming about sudden pain. Security responded. In the chaos, she grabbed an officer's arm. Within minutes, CPS workers arrived, taking her to safety. Thursday was a blur of legal meetings. Patricia documented every intimidation attempt, every harassment tactic. The journalist moved forward with the story, despite legal threats. More girls came forward, not just from our community, but from others who had heard whispers of our network. Patricia smiled grimly. You started something they can't stop. Friday morning, sirens screamed close to our new safe house. A car in the parking lot was burning, dolls dressed in wedding dresses charred beyond recognition. Another warning. Margaret urged me to relocate, but I refused to hide any longer. We compromised, staying put with increased security, rotating off-duty officers, panic buttons linked to 911, constant vigilance, and a constantly changing routine. Saturday brought unexpected hope. The article went viral within hours. Messages poured in from women who had escaped similar situations, offering resources and solidarity. The first ripple had become a wave. Anna texted me, 12 girls in 3 states had received notebooks. They were making copies. You did it. Sunday was quiet, but I sensed the calm before the storm. Monday, a formal disownment announcement in the community newsletter declared me erased from the family entirely. No name, no photos, no acknowledgement. In their world, it was worse than death, yet I felt relief. Their final card had been played, and I was still standing. Tuesday brought more victories. Girls came forward, emergency orders filed. Meetings with organization leaders solidified the Freedom Network, hidden safe houses, legal backing, emergency protocols, and coordinated distribution of information. Stolen pamphlets had become a movement. That night, another call. A girl's voice trembling with fear and hope. I found your notebook. Can you help me? Yes, I said, pen in hand. Tell me everything. And in that moment, as I guided yet another terrified girl toward freedom, I realized we had already won the battle that mattered most. Knowledge, courage, and solidarity were stronger than fear. The war for our freedom had begun, and this time we were ready. The week that followed was a blur of adrenaline, fear, and purpose. Every morning I awoke with the heavy weight of anticipation, knowing that today could be the day someone tried to breach the fortress we'd built. The retired officer who oversaw the safe house reminded me constantly, trust no pattern, trust no routine. But even with that knowledge, the tension never eased. I could feel it in my chest, a low, constant thrum, like the pulse of some unseen predator. Monday began with a flurry of calls from girls across the state. One, barely 13, had found a notebook tucked beneath a false panel in her bedroom dresser. She had scribbled frantic notes to herself, describing threats, intimidation, and the looming promise of a forced marriage. Her mother was unaware, distracted by the family's own rigid adherence to tradition. I guided her through the steps of safety, instructing her to pack a small bag with essentials and leave it with a trusted teacher. The relief in her voice when she understood that she had options made every sleepless night worth it. By Tuesday, the network had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. 15 girls from 3 different cities had contacted me directly. They had memorized the emergency numbers, hidden copies of the notebooks in secret places, and were teaching younger girls to do the same. Each new girl was a victory, a small act of rebellion that carried enormous weight. And yet, the backlash intensified. Late that afternoon, Margaret called, her voice strained. There's been an incident at one of the schools where our notebooks were distributed. A parent discovered one of the hidden guides. They've filed a formal complaint alleging that you've been corrupting children. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my shaking hands. They'll try to scare us, I said, but fear doesn't work anymore. Patricia had been preparing for exactly this. She reminded me that the law was on our side and that the evidence of abuse, coercion, and intimidation was concrete. Still, the stress of watching a system designed to protect children being twisted to punish the messenger was suffocating. Wednesday brought more immediate danger. A call came from a girl named Layla, 15, living in a rural area far from the city. Her father had discovered the notebook she had hidden in her textbook. He was furious, threatening to send her abroad to a relative in another country to correct her behavior. We had only hours to act. With Margaret coordinating, a team of social workers and law enforcement moved swiftly. We guided Layla to a safe location, a temporary foster placement with a trusted family friend. When she finally closed the door behind her at the new location, I could hear her sobs of relief. They were not the sobs of defeat, they were the sound of survival. By Thursday, the pressure was mounting everywhere. News of our network had spread silently among the community, whispered from one girl to another. That whisper had reached the wrong ears. The first serious attempt at sabotage came when someone attempted to hack into my phone and email, sending false information to the authorities to discredit me. I didn't panic, but my blood ran cold. They were learning, adapting, trying to find any angle to undermine us. Meanwhile, the media interest intensified. The journalist had begun working on the full story, interviewing social workers, law enforcement, and girls who had escaped. Her coverage was careful, methodical, presenting evidence without exposing identities. Every publication of a detail, every article, was a beacon of hope for those trapped, a signal that the world was watching. And that visibility was as dangerous as it was necessary. Friday brought the most personal confrontation yet. While reviewing the security footage from the safe house, the retired officer noticed a car parked suspiciously outside for several hours. Two men had been watching the building, taking note of comings and goings. Police were called immediately. It was a clear warning, a message that we were being tracked. I felt a chill in my bones as I realized just how far my father's influence could reach. Yet, even in that fear, there was resolve. I refused to back down. I refused to hide. Saturday arrived with a bittersweet victory. Samira, the girl who had bravely screamed her way into CPS protection, had successfully begun her transition into a permanent safe house. Seeing her stand a little taller, her voice stronger, her eyes less haunted, was a reminder of why we were fighting. Every girl rescued, every life altered, reinforced the truth that courage could ripple outward in ways no one expected. As the weekend ended, we faced a new, insidious threat. Anonymous social media accounts began posting doctored images, videos, and false claims, portraying me as a predator, a manipulator of minors, and a threat to the community. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers began questioning the legitimacy of the Freedom Network. Patricia worked tirelessly, documenting every post, coordinating with digital security experts to remove content and trace the sources. Yet, the psychological toll was immense. I found myself lying awake at night, heart hammering, mind racing through every potential scenario. Could someone infiltrate the network? Could they sabotage the progress we'd made? Monday morning, the situation escalated dramatically. A girl from another state, one of the first to receive a notebook, was intercepted by family members who had been tipped off. They were taking her across state lines, attempting to silence her permanently. I knew the risks, and I knew the statistics. Once moved, these girls rarely resurfaced, but I also knew we had a plan. We coordinated with local authorities and an emergency team to intercept the transport. From a distance, I watched as the van approached the courthouse. The girl, no older than 14, was pressed between relatives, their hands gripping her arms tightly. Our eyes met for just a moment through the tinted windows. I mouthed the word run. At first, she didn't move, paralyzed by fear and instinct. But as the van neared the checkpoint, she suddenly collapsed, screaming about a sharp pain in her stomach, a tactic I had taught her, a diversion to create chaos. Security responded immediately. She grabbed an officer's arm, refusing to release it, forcing them to call for additional assistance. Within minutes, CPS workers arrived, taking her into protection. I exhaled a shaky breath, tears streaming down my face, relief and exhilaration mingling into a strange, potent cocktail. By midweek, the Freedom Network had reached a critical mass. Girls across multiple states were secretly sharing notebooks, teaching one another to hide evidence, to memorize emergency numbers, and to recognize signs of coercion and abuse. Our strategy was working. The more they tried to control us, the more decentralized and resilient our network became. We were no longer just a small group hiding in fear, we were a movement, but the tension never relented. Anonymous threats continued. Doctored videos circulated online. Law enforcement warnings and protective measures became routine. And still, we pushed forward. We couldn't stop. Every girl we reached, every life we altered, was proof that the system of fear could be dismantled. Friday evening, I received a call from Fatima. She had tracked down another girl, someone who had vanished from her community after being promised to a much older man. Fatima's calm, determined voice carried over the phone. She's scared, but she knows she can survive. You need to act fast. Within hours, a team was on the move. The girl was removed safely, her parents temporarily restrained by emergency protective orders. Each rescue strengthened my resolve. Each success sent ripples through the community, showing other girls that freedom was possible. By Saturday, I realized the truth. The war had shifted. It was no longer about hiding or escaping. It was about teaching, spreading knowledge, and creating a system of support so robust that no family, no community, could control it entirely. The Freedom Network had become more than a series of notebooks and emergency numbers. It was hope, survival, and resilience embodied. Sunday, I allowed myself a brief moment of reflection. Looking back at the weeks of chaos, fear, danger, and triumph, I realized we had already achieved something remarkable. The girls who had once felt powerless were now learning to wield their own agency. Knowledge had become armor, solidarity had become shield, and in the midst of threats and intimidation, we had forged a lifeline for those who needed it most. But as I stared at the stacks of newly prepared notebooks, the lists of contacts, the maps of safe houses, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the war was far from over. The families, the enforcers, the manipulators, they would adapt, escalate, and attempt to regain control. But now we were ready. Every girl we reached, every life we altered was a battle won. And in that truth, I found a quiet, unshakable power. No one could erase the knowledge we had shared, the courage we had inspired, or the lives we had changed. We were no longer just survivors. We were a force, and the movement had only just begun. Monday arrived with an uneasy quiet that belied the storm looming over us. The Freedom Network had grown, but growth always drew attention, and attention always attracted danger. As I stepped into the safe house that morning, the retired officer's sharp eyes met mine. "They're planning something," he said quietly. "I don't know what yet, but it's big." Margaret and Patricia were already reviewing the latest reports. Anonymous tips had come in from community members warning that some of the girls we had helped might be targeted for coercion, or worse. The network had expanded faster than anyone could have anticipated, and with expansion came vulnerability. Every new girl we reached increased the stakes. By late morning, the first warning arrived. A video appeared online, crudely edited but chillingly effective. Snippets of girls I had helped, voices altered, faces blurred, accusing me of corruption, manipulation, and turning families against themselves. It was crafted to instill fear, not just in me, but in every girl who dared to look at the notebooks. I felt a familiar chill in my chest, but Patricia's voice was steady. "Ignore it, document everything. They want a reaction, don't give them one." Hours later, a call from one of the social workers brought news that made my blood run cold. A girl in New Jersey, 16, who had just begun to take steps toward independence, had been abducted by her relatives. Claimed she was missing and were threatening legal action to reclaim her. Margaret immediately coordinated with local authorities and a rapid response team. Every second counted. I could almost feel the girl's fear, her trembling hands, the desperation in her eyes as she tried to recall the emergency numbers and the code phrases we had taught her. By evening, we had located her, cornered by a combination of law enforcement and CPS intervention. She was safely taken to a temporary placement. She buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing in relief. "I didn't think I'd ever escape," she whispered. Her voice shook, but there was a glimmer of determination behind it now. Every rescue, every act of defiance added fuel to the network, spreading courage like wildfire. But the backlash was relentless. That night, another message arrived, this time in the form of a physical threat. Someone had left a box outside the safe house containing burned dolls dressed as brides, charred and unrecognizable. The message was unmistakable. They were watching, they were ruthless, and they were willing to cross lines that law and morality should have prevented. The retired officer immediately heightened security protocols. Panic buttons were now connected to multiple police precincts, and surveillance was extended around the clock. Yet, despite the fear, a steely resolve settled over me. They want us afraid. They won't succeed. Tuesday brought legal maneuvers designed to discredit everything we had built. My father's lawyer filed motions claiming that I was coercing minors into dangerous situations and interfering with parental rights. Every court filing, every baseless accusation was meant to shake me, to intimidate us into silence. Patricia countered methodically, presenting evidence, witness testimonies, and documented threats from the family. The law, it seemed, was one of the few places where truth still mattered. Amidst the chaos, the network continued to grow. Girls from neighboring states were beginning to contact us through secure channels, sharing stories of abuse, threats, and forced promises. They were scared, but they were also empowered. The notebooks, once a simple means of spreading information, had become symbols of resistance. Hidden pockets, coded instructions, and disguised legal guides allowed them to access knowledge without alerting their families. Each notebook was a lifeline, and with every girl who received one, the movement became more unstoppable. Wednesday morning was tense. The retired officer discovered another suspicious vehicle parked near the building. Two men were surveilling the property, their presence menacing but careful. Police were called immediately, but it was clear this was only a warning. Whoever was orchestrating these attacks was meticulous, resourceful, and patient. Understood that fear could be a weapon, and they wielded it ruthlessly. By afternoon, an unexpected breakthrough arrived. Fatima had located another girl, 14, who had been hidden in her family home under constant surveillance. Fatima's calm, determined voice guided us. She's scared, but she knows she can survive. You need to act fast. Within hours, a team of social workers and law enforcement removed the girl safely. Watching her hands clutch the notebook, her eyes wide with disbelief and hope, I felt an indescribable mix of relief and exhilaration. Each rescue was a small triumph, a tangible victory over fear and oppression. Thursday brought the media storm to a fever pitch. The journalist who had been covering our network received legal threats, but she refused to be silenced. Her article, once published, went viral. Comments poured in from survivors, advocates, and ordinary women inspired by the story. Messages of hope, guidance, and solidarity flooded the inboxes of the network. We weren't just a small underground movement anymore, we were a lifeline reaching across states, across families, across fear. But the threats persisted. Anonymous social media accounts circulated false accusations, doctored photos, and videos designed to undermine the network's credibility. Teachers, social workers, and volunteers received intimidating calls and messages. Yet every act of intimidation only strengthened our resolve. Each new threat reminded us of the stakes, of the girls depending on us, and of the lives that could be changed if we refused to back down. Friday, I received a call from Samira. She had successfully integrated into a permanent safe house, her voice stronger, her posture straighter, her fear finally giving way to determination. And with her, dozens of others were beginning to see the possibilities of independence, the strength of knowledge, and the power of solidarity. By Saturday, the Freedom Network had become more than a collection of notebooks and emergency numbers. It was a living, breathing system of empowerment. Every girl who had received knowledge was a potential guide for others. Every act of courage, every whispered conversation, every hidden notebook was a testament to the unstoppable nature of informed resistance. That night, as I sat reviewing the latest distribution maps, I realized the truth. We had reached a point where retreat was no longer an option. The network had grown too strong, too visible, and too vital to the lives of countless girls to be silenced. Fear would always be present, threats would always loom, but knowledge had become our shield, and courage had become our sword. Sunday morning brought a moment of quiet reflection. As I watched the sun rise over the city, I thought of the girls we had helped, the lives already transformed, and the countless others still trapped. The war was far from over, but for the first time I felt something deeper than fear or exhaustion. I felt hope, raw, unshakable, and alive. The Freedom Network was no longer a secret. It was a movement, a lifeline, and a promise that no girl would ever feel powerless again. And in that hope, I found the strength to continue, to fight, to lead, to ensure that no matter the threats, no matter the intimidation, no matter the darkness, we would survive, and we would ensure others did too. The week began with a heavy tension that pressed against every corner of the safe house. The Freedom Network had grown beyond what I could have imagined, yet the danger lurking outside had escalated just as fast. Every siren, every anonymous tip, every shadowed figure felt like a countdown, a reminder that the battle was far from over. Monday morning arrived with an ominous calm. Tricia had called early, her voice tight with concern. "They've filed another motion," she said. "This one is larger. They're trying to bring charges against you, the social workers, even the retired officer. They claim obstruction of parental authority. They're aiming to destroy everything you've built." I clenched my fists, the familiar surge of determination replacing fear. "Let them try," I said quietly. "We have truth, we have evidence, and we have each other." By mid-morning, a van was spotted outside the perimeter, an unfamiliar vehicle, sleek, with darkened windows. Security cameras captured men in masks approaching cautiously. The retired officer immediately implemented lockdown procedures. Every exit was secured, panic buttons connected, authorities on standby. Yet, I felt a thrill of adrenaline. The fight was coming directly to us, and I was ready. Around noon, an encrypted video call came through. 6 girls, all younger, all terrified, appeared on the screen. Their parents were threatening them, forcing them to say lies for the cameras. I studied their faces, recognized the fear in their eyes, the same fear I'd known all too well. I whispered into the microphone, voice steady, full of authority. "You are not alone. You have choices. You have rights. Breathe, then follow my instructions." One by one, we guided them. Hidden codes, backup contacts, safe words, everything we had painstakingly prepared. It took hours, patience, and nerves of steel, but by the evening, all 6 were safely extracted to emergency placements. Watching them breathe freely for the first time in years, I felt something deeper than relief. I felt the network's power, the collective courage of girls refusing to be silenced. Tuesday brought the courtroom showdown that would decide everything. My father's lawyer had launched a full-scale attack, trying to discredit every social worker, every volunteer, and even the retired officer. The courtroom was packed: journalists, allies from the Freedom Network, and girls who had escaped. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that makes hearts pound and voices tremble. Patricia was flawless. She laid out a timeline of threats, harassment, and attempts to silence us. Videos, photos, and physical evidence of intimidation were presented. The burned dolls, the broken windows, the anonymous messages, all documented meticulously. Fatima's testimony from years ago was referenced, her survival a reminder of what happens when no one intervenes. Then came the moment that shifted everything. One by one, girls who had escaped stepped forward, not with fear, but with courage. Their voices, strong, unwavering, recounted their experiences, the abuse they had endured, and the choices they had made to reclaim their lives. Every word struck like a hammer against the lies. The courtroom trembled, the jury visibly moved. Even some of my father's supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the stand, chest heavy with emotion but mind clear. Every memory, the threats, the violence, the lies, the fear, flashed through me. Yet I spoke with certainty, with honesty, with unwavering resolve. "I'm not just surviving," I said, voice steady. "I am living, and I am helping others do the same. We have the right to safety, we have the right to knowledge, and no one can erase that." The judge listened intently, the room silent except for the sound of my words. When the gavel finally came down, the ruling was unambiguous. Every protective order was upheld. Every attempt to intimidate, to discredit, to control was legally nullified. My family, the lawyers, the hired men, they had lost. Justice had been served. Outside, Fatima embraced me tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "You finally did it." I nodded, tears streaming. Around us, girls who had survived and escaped shared smiles, relief, and laughter. For the first time, the network's strength was visible, undeniable. It wasn't just a series of notebooks or secret codes anymore. It was a living, breathing force. That evening, the Freedom Network held its first celebration. Volunteers, survivors, allies, all gathered, united in purpose. Plans for expansion, education, and support flowed freely. Every girl who had once whispered in fear now spoke with authority, guidance, and hope. Notebooks would continue to circulate. New girls would be helped, and the cycle of fear would be broken, one courageous act at a time. As night fell, I looked at the city skyline, the glow of streetlights reflecting in my eyes. The danger hadn't vanished entirely. Threats would come, challenges would arise, but the truth, the courage, and the knowledge we shared had created a shield no threat could fully pierce. And then a message arrived, small, simple, but monumental. A girl in Texas, one we had never met, had found a notebook. She had used it to escape, to reach authorities, to reclaim her life. She wrote, "Because of you, I'm free, and I will help others too." I smiled, heart swelling. This was the beginning of something bigger than any one of us. The war for freedom, for choice, for survival. It might never truly end, but victory was possible. And we had won the first, most important battle. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every girl I had helped, every life changed, every barrier broken. I whispered softly, almost to myself, "We are unstoppable, and no one, not threats, not fear, not oppression, will ever erase us again." The Freedom Network was no longer secret. It was alive, unstoppable, and radiant. And I knew, without a doubt, that the lives we touched today would ripple outward, transforming the future for countless girls who had once been silenced. The fight was not over, but for the first time I believed fully and completely that we could win.